Well, with all the talk about transfers and reclassifications, who's coming back, who's not, we really haven't spent a ton of time yet talking about the two incoming freshmen for North Carolina, Zayden High and Simeon Wilcher. What's going to be their floor and ceiling for this year's team? We're going to get into it today.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Friday, May 26th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, a 5 days a week show where we're bringing you all the best North Carolina Tar Heels content out there that we can. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, joined today by two of my favorite dudes out there from the Heel Tough blog, Mr. Anthony Pagnotta and Mr. Josh Marlow. I feel like I just need to remember the order I introduce you guys each week so that like next week it's Marlow's turn to go first, and that'll be great. Got to get the love going both ways. Seriously, folks, thanks so much for joining us today, making us your first watch or listen, particularly you everydayers. Always great to have you with us. If you're not an everydayer on the show, come join us, man. This community is growing and we're having a blast. Coming up on the show, we do want to look at Michael Merdinger, a North Carolina quarterback commit, who he's going to be. Is he going to be the next in this line of elite quarterbacks at North Carolina? Also want to update you on the women's tennis doubles going on literally right now as record, so we'll update you in real time, along with baseball, who's playing Virginia right now for a chance to go to the ACC semifinals. In fact, let me go ahead and give you an update, and we'll do it again later. North Carolina is up 1-0 on the Who's in the top of the third. Tar Heels batting. One doubles tennis team already through, and Drake Maye and Schade are up a set on serve in the second. So that's where we're sitting right now. But before we get to all of that, here's what we want to do. We're going to start with Zayden High, talk about what it seems like right now is his role on the team next year, his floor, his ceiling, and then in just a little bit, we'll do the same with Simeon Wilcher. Marlow, why don't we throw it to you first? Would love to just start a conversation about Zayden High and where he fits into the 2023-24 Tar Heels.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance for him to carve out a role in that front court for Carolina, because you look at one of the biggest issues that plagued this team last year, and even before the run back 2 years ago and the run in the national championship, just not a lot of depth in that front court. It was a lot of Armando Bacot playing 34-plus minutes a night. You had Brady Manek 2 years ago, but it wasn't really until late January, early February that he kind of emerged as that guy. And then this past year, you had Bacot back. You bring in Pete Nance, who just never really found his footing. And with Jalen Washington coming back from injury and Will Shaver getting hurt in the middle of the year, there just wasn't a whole lot of depth there in the front court. And as much as Hubert Davis loves to play his starters in a conference as physical as the ACC, you got to have an extra body or two to throw in there. And I think Jalen Washington is going to have a big-time year this year as a sophomore. I think he's destined to do some really great things. And I know you've got some guys that can play the quote-unquote four, when you look at a traditional lineup. But Hubert Davis wants to play four around one. He wants to play with primarily one big on the floor. And Zayden High is the guy that can be that stretch four guy for you as well. But if he can just add some more depth behind Armando Bacot along with Jalen Washington, that'll go a long way. And that's just something that I think Carolina desperately needs, because it's really hard to go through a 35-game sample size before the NCAA tournament playing two dudes. And then we saw in the tournament this year, there's no such thing as too much depth. So if Carolina can just be deeper in the front court and Zayden High factors into that, no matter what his numbers are, I think as long as he has a consistent role, I think everyone, including himself, should be pleased with his freshman season.
Yeah, I love that. Pagnotta, keep going. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, with him, I mean, he's a pretty raw dude. I mean, I've seen him a few times in some of these tournaments that we saw, especially the ones at the end of the season. The guy showed
nationals. Yeah,
he played, and look, he was banged up, and that's an element of it too. He missed some games right before that, and so he wasn't 100%. But he wasn't a guy that was a full-time starter on that team for the entire season. And, offensively, he kind of ebbs and flows. So I think for him, I'm hoping that the mindset that he's bringing there is that, hey, I'm coming here to learn and everything like that. But with that being said, I mean, look, what Josh is talking about, look, there's opportunity to play there. There's not a lot of depth. You've seen these guys that have exited the program. So he's the guy that can benefit the most from all of those guys exiting. And you talk about, the depth that Carolina has in the middle. Yeah, you got, two guys, Armando Bacot, Jalen Washington will probably be your primary guy off the bench. A lot of people, that they want to see both Armando and Jalen out there at times this season, make that, something that is at least a lineup that they can throw out there. Right. But again, it's really just those two guys. And you're if they do have injury issues, you run into a scenario where you may not have anybody. And then what are you going to do? You're going to play small and play a guy 40 minutes during a game? I mean, clearly you wouldn't. You'd have to go incredibly small, but then that's going to compromise some things that Carolina wants to do. So there is an opportunity here for Zayden High to step up. I will say this: he is not as raw as somebody like Will Shaver. Like there is talent there. There's no question about that. I think he'll get the opportunity, but the thing that Tar Heel fans have to do is they have to temper their expectations. This is not a guy that's going to come in here and be, I saw before Carolina went into the transfer portal and added some guys, some people were like, well, could this guy be a starter? That is not at all what he needs to be. Even a guy that plays, 15, 20 minutes off the bench, that might not even be what's best for him, at least out of the gate. Give him some time, let him develop. But I really do think that he's a guy that sort of fits what Carolina ultimately wants to do in the long term with how athletic he is on the perimeter, what he can do as a stretch four. And especially if he can, develop a little bit of weight onto that frame, I think he could certainly be what fits what Carolina is looking for out of that 4 spot.
Well, you expect Jonas Saration's going to take care of adding some weight to that frame for sure, as he can capably do. Also, we've obviously got to talk about Jae'lyn Withers in this mix as part of that front court rotation. And then Marlow, as you said earlier, what will be some of those small ball lineups? How often will we see Harrison Ingram at the 4, for example? And then as we know, as we sit here today, the roster is not complete because there are still 3 scholarships available. If Hubert Davis chooses to use those or not, there is potential to still add front court depth at this point. But yeah, I mean, as you look at it, you guys have both said it. You've got Bacot, you've got Washington, you've got Withers and Zayden High. And so I know this is just from conversations I've had, that this is a young man that wants to work his absolute butt off to do everything he can, which they've got to, or they wouldn't be at this point to start with. But go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to add, if he could be a guy, an energy guy that comes off the bench and he just runs that floor for you, he runs 94 feet, getting rebounds and stuff like that. Think about it. Carolina hasn't had that from a front court player in quite some time. And when you look at their secondary break and their transition offense, especially under Roy Williams, that's what made them lethal, was that they had bigs that could outrun your bigs. Yep. I want to see Carolina getting back to doing that. I want to see us running the floor. We've got guards that want to push the ball up the court and stuff like that. If you get the ball advanced, and here comes a 6'10" power forward running, with a head full of steam, he's going to put his armpit in the rim a lot more frequently and stuff like that. So, there's just a lot of different ways he can carve a role on this roster and in this rotation, and being that type of guy, I think would do a lot of things for Carolina from an energy standpoint and just from a bench production standpoint.
I mean, you think about guys like Tyler Zeller and Bryce Johnson that just went out and did that. And I mean, Zeller won ACC Player of the Year doing those exact things, Marlow. And so I'm right with you. Would love to see it. So let's bottom line this, bottom line it for Zayden High. What, as we look, I'm so sorry for being so cheesy. What right now in late May, as we look at it, what would we say is the floor for Zayden? And what would we say is the ceiling if it was the roof?
Man, like his floor, I think would be a guy that plays in November, in December, but is the guy that gets squeezed out when you get into ACC play. Something that hopefully we actually have enough depth to do from November and December into January. The first 2 years hasn't really been the case. I think the ceiling for him is exactly what I just said, a guy that has a consistent role night in, night out, that is playing meaningful minutes in meaningful ACC games and doing the little things while he continues to get his body where it needs to get to, getting acclimated to playing at the ACC level night in, night out. I don't see this being a situation where he doesn't play at all like
No.
Will Shaver did. I think this is going to be a guy that is going to get his minutes, and Hubert Davis is going to allow him to dictate how big of a role he has, as the season gets longer.
Yeah. Pagnotta, any disagreements or any additions there?
No, not really. I mean, I would say his floor is probably a guy that just, gets, as Josh said, probably gets faded out of the rotation at some point. Don't really know how early that is. Or, even if doesn't get completely faded out, is that guy that sort of, comes in for, a certain game for 4 minutes, then we don't see him for 3 or 4 games, something like that. The ceiling, I mean, yeah, it's hard to imagine that he's going to overtake your primary big off of the bench in Jalen Washington. They still got to figure out what exactly they're doing with Jae'lyn Withers. Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be somebody that comes off the bench? I would imagine he'll probably be a starter as of right now. And look, they're going to use a lot of small lineups. So to me, if he can be a guy that can average even 12 to 15 minutes off the bench, I think that's probably his ceiling as a guy that really surprises with his upside. Maybe he is that energy guy that can run the floor off the bench, does those types of things, helps you out on the defensive end of the floor. That's an area I think he could certainly help. So I think that's probably what you would look at as the ceiling for him this year. And I think that fits him well as a 4-star prospect.
I completely agree with everything you guys are saying. That floor is rooted in the Hubert Davis inability to carve out specific roles. Josh, I thought you said that. So, or whoever said it, I don't remember.
I'll take the credit.
Yeah, but it was probably Pagnotta at the end of the day. Yeah. But yeah, I think that 10 to 15 minute range is a great ceiling for him for this year as he then continues to grow and succeed for the Tar Heels. Next, we want to have this exact same conversation about Simeon Wilcher, his floor, his ceiling, his role with the 23-24 Tar Heels. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, I need to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Bird Dogs. Listen, we're getting into the summer and it's short season. I just bought a couple pairs of Bird Dogs for myself for the first time. And I'm usually like, whatever with wearing shorts, but I love these. They're so comfortable. I love how I look in them. I love how I feel. I love that they're like this stretchy fabric. They have a liner that can help keep you cool. My body is a furnace and I need to stay cool. Not to mention the versatility of Bird Dog shorts and pants. You can wear them in formal occasions. You can wear them when you're just chilling out around the house. Whatever it is, Bird Dogs is going to do it for you. So if you want to feel the same like me, feel really comfortable, go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you enter promo code lockedoncollege, they're going to throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every single order. So go order from Bird Dogs. You won't be disappointed. I promise you. And Bird Dogs, a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. All right, we are joined today on Locked On Tar Heels by our guys Anthony Pagnotta, Josh Marlow from the Heel Tough blog. We've just talked about incoming freshman Zayden High, his expected role and floor and ceiling as we look at things right now. Obviously, that could still change if there's any more roster developments this offseason. But we want to have the same conversation about incoming backcourt player Simeon Wilcher. Marlow, let's start with you again, and then we'll give Pagnotta the first word when we get into the third segment of the day. But as you look at Simeon Wilcher and everything that this young man can do coming in, how do you foresee his role and floor and ceiling this season?
I think his role needs to be the running mate with Seth Trimble coming off the bench. And I don't think that was the expectation 3-4 weeks ago. I think that guy was going to be DeMarco Dunn. And then he decided right up against the horn to enter the transfer portal and no longer going to be a part of Carolina basketball moving forward. And the thing is I think Wilcher has enough of a skill set to come right in as a freshman and really have an impact coming off the bench. And I think that was something that Seth Trimble really struggled with a year ago when he was coming off the bench. He had nobody to run with him. And we know that kid likes to get up the court as fast as anybody on this roster. Having a guy that wants to play out in the open court with him and be able to make plays in that type of game was going to make Seth Trimble a much better player.
Wow.
I would imagine, today that Paxson Wojcik would be another guy that's coming off the bench. But I feel like Simeon Wilcher has a much higher ceiling. I think he's got a lot more talent than Paxson Wojcik has to offer. So this is a guy that I still thought, before the Dunn transfer, gonna have a role on this roster. But I think that role got bigger with Dunn transferring out. And I think he has as good an opportunity as any freshman since Hubert Davis became the head coach to have a consistent night in, night out role, making a difference off the bench. Because I think Carolina's going to need him to, just because one of their biggest issues the last couple of years is they couldn't get anything from their bench. It's hard to win that way. We've learned that so far 2 years under Hubert Davis. And you can add him to a bench with Trimble, a veteran in Wojcik, whatever forward is coming off the bench, Zayden High, whoever, that takes Carolina to a whole nother level. So I'm really excited about the potential he has once he gets on campus.
Well, and we talked about the Zayden High potentially getting out and running. If he can get out and run with both of those guys, Trimble and Wilcher, running along with him, man, what a second unit that would be that could just run other teams off the court. And then you get the starting five back in off of that. I mean, that could be a lethal combination in those backup minutes. Pagnotta, what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about him that, we probably all talked about here at some point is just how good of a scorer he is. And that's what this Tar Heel team really needs is they need consistent scoring off of that bench. And I think that's ultimately what his role is going to be. I would be a little shocked at this point if he ends up becoming a starter because Carolina went out and got Cormac Ryan. But I mean, yeah, this could be your best player off the bench if enough things go right. Because if you just look at him talent-wise, I mean, he's better than everybody else right now that's on your bench. So, for him, I think as Josh said, look, there's a lot of opportunity there now because DeMarco Dunn left. I got to be honest, I think even if DeMarco Dunn had stayed, he would have been fighting for that job with Wilcher. Because the thing about DeMarco Dunn is he just doesn't pack that scoring punch. He had improved, certainly, and he's probably a guy that, especially as of right now, is a better defender than Wilcher is. But at the same time, Wilcher's a guy that we've seen it over the last few years, and we're seeing it again now on the summer AAU trails. It's a dude that knows how to score the basketball. So Carolina really, really needs those types of guys. Paxson Wojcik, the thing about him, we got to figure out where he's going to play. Because,
yes, I'm with you. Yep.
His shooting ability would tell you, well, he could probably play the 2-guard, but he's also a guy that averaged 7 rebounds a game. I get it, Ivy League, but, still a guy like that probably fits you a little bit better on the wing and could provide you more wing depth than anything. So I really think opportunities are going to be there for Simeon Wilcher. And I think he's more than capable of stepping up. Being, a freshman guard, we've seen, a lot of guys here in recent years for Carolina that have to come in and start immediately. Even some of the guys that they had last year, Caleb Love, RJ Davis, those guys had to come in and make major impacts right out of the gate. The pressure is not quite on Wilcher, like some of those other guys. I wonder if that almost serves him better and allows him to be maybe not put up the same numbers as those guys, but ultimately be a little more efficient his freshman year in his role.
And as you guys have kind of talked that through and unpacked it, I don't think Hubert Davis would do this, but you can see a second unit that would be fully formed 5, right? Like,
that.
Do what?
I would love that.
Right. Like Washington at the 5, Zayden High at the 4, Wojcik at the 3. You got Seth Trimble at the 1 and Simeon at the 2. I mean, that's a second unit I would feel very comfortable with, depending on how all the pieces ultimately fit. But my goodness,
and that doesn't even count Kadu in there if he ends up reclassing. Like, that's just, we're talking about a completely different team than we've seen the last 2 years, where the depth has been our biggest concern.
Well, and I think the biggest thing, as much as we've criticized Hubert Davis's rotations, if you will, here's the thing: if you really look at that roster, it wasn't equipped to play 9-10 guys. It was, at best, it was an 8-man roster. Mm-hmm. This one, like, in a best case scenario world, and we try to be somewhat optimistic and positive when we talk with you, Schade.
Yep.
There is a pathway to Carolina having what you just talked about. One of the things I've complained about is when we haven't played good, we haven't seen that 5-for-5 switch. Yep. Whereas you ain't had 5 guys you could legitimately put in the game to sit your starters down and make them watch while the backups play. That's different now. With the way they've attacked this roster through the transfer portal and stuff like that, and with 3 other scholarships available, there could be a scenario where you're doing a hockey line switch, whether they're playing good, playing bad, or indifferent. And for a guy like me who grew up seeing Carolina do that stuff all the time, that does get me excited.
Well, I mean, when we think about Wilcher's floor and ceiling, I think I would budget up just a little bit above Zayden High's, just because I think Wilcher at this point is a little more ready. And, as we compared him to DeMarco, like Pagnotta, you talked about DeMarco just not having that offensive aggression. Like that is Wilcher, man. He is this guy that's going to go out and I'm the dude. I've got the swagger. I've got the confidence. Let's get after it. And I know for some people that can be misplaced. With him, I don't think it is. And I think it's going to serve him well to come in and say, hey, I got this, Coach Davis. Let's go. Let's get after it. So let's put a minutes number on it. Floor for minutes.
God, I would say the floor 8, maybe 8. I think the high, and you're talking about a guy that plays, 16 minutes off the bench. I don't think it's out of the realm of the possibility, depending on how the rest of the roster fills out. And I know Duke's bringing in, a ton of freshman talent and stuff like that. This guy, I think, could get freshman of the year type of recognition for Carolina. He's got that type of mentality. If he has the perfect role and stuff like that, where he's put in a position to succeed and he's not being pressed into a position where he's not yet built for, I think this guy can do some really big time things and be a big reason why, hopefully, this team competes for an ACC championship.
Man, Pagnotta?
Yeah, his floor, I would say, it's probably somewhere around that 8-9 minute. It really just depends, because there's so many other established guys right now in that backcourt where if you do struggle, somebody's going to take your spot. Where in the front court, we really need you up there. That's why Zayden High could run into a scenario where he plays more than him. But for the ceiling, I mean, look, he could be the guy that leads this team in minutes off the bench. He could be a guy that averages 19, 22 a night, something like that, depending on what the situation is in a game. The guy that I could liken him to, if he ends up hitting his ceiling, is kind of what we saw from Matthew Cleveland in his freshman year at Florida State, where he came off the bench, but he was a guy that could light it up. Now, I don't know if he's going to be the type of shooter that Matthew Cleveland was, but at the same time, in terms of providing a scoring punch, a guy that can really just create his own offense. That's the other thing. And I know people are probably a little paranoid right now because they're like, well, isn't Caleb Love a guy that could create his own offense? Yeah. I think that Simeon Wilcher is going to be a little bit less. Is aggressive the right term? I don't really know what we say about Caleb Love, but I think he's going to sort of know, especially with the guys that this roster has, that he doesn't have to take over games. That was the thing I think with Caleb, was he always felt like, and he got that when he came out as a freshman, hey, you're going to have to be the guy on the team. That's not what Wilcher is coming into. So I think it's going to serve him really well. And I could see him being a guy that's in the conversation for sixth man of the year in the ACC. And yeah, definitely in some of those freshman of the year conversations. Although if he doesn't end up starting, it might be tough to see him win that type of award.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things for me is kind of what you were saying about that comparison with Caleb Love. I think he is ultimately a better decision maker from everything I've seen thus far. About what shots to take, what not to take, and all of those kind of things. And so would make me feel really good. Now, we want to close out switching from the basketball court to the football field. We need to talk about, man, where is Carolina going to quarterback after Drake Maye takes off for the NFL? Also want to update you on baseball and tennis and all that going on. We'll do that in just a second. We want to end our show today by having a conversation about Michael Merdinger, one of Carolina's verbal commits at quarterback. Really quick, let me update you on tennis. We've got 2 women's doubles teams left. Earlier on Thursday, Fiona Crawley and Carson Tanguilig punched their ticket for the Final Four with a 6-1, 6-2 victory. So they will play in the Final Four on Friday. Literally as we speak, Reese Brantmeyer and Elizabeth Schade just lost the second set in a tiebreaker. So they're starting the third set right now as we speak. And they are up 2-1 and up a break. So that is, no, I'm sorry. They're just playing a super tiebreaker kind of thing. So they're up 2-1 in that tiebreaker right now. On the baseball side of things, Tar Heels just put up a 3 spot in the top of the 4th. So they're up 4-1. Obviously, you're watching this on Friday or after, so you already know whether they won or not, but you're getting to see what we're experiencing in real time. All right, Pagnotta, as I said, I want to turn to you first this time. North Carolina got a commitment from Michael Merdinger, who is kind of the next in line with the quarterbacks class. We have been spoiled the last several years with our guy under center, from Sam Howell right at the beginning of Mac Brown 2.0, and now Drake Maye even raising it up another level, as you, my friend, had talked about last week on the show. The question now becomes, what happens next year when Drake Maye, I say presumably, but let's be honest, will be leaving? Is Merdinger the guy to come in? Or is it somebody else that's already on the roster? Is it somebody in the transfer portal? When you look at who Merdinger is, what do you see from him as a quarterback?
Yeah, well, it's a guy that's coming in pretty raw. Talked to a guy recently that covers football down in the state of Florida, who said, look, it's his first year as a starter at Cardinal Gibbons High School, but he has been a starter before. John Santucci is his name. I had to look it up. I had his DM over here. I had to scroll down. But yeah, no, he said, look, he did some really good things in his freshman year at Deerfield Beach High School. His sophomore year sort of struggled a little bit, ends up transferring, sits behind a guy in Dylan Rizk who goes to Central Florida, and now he's getting his opportunity, and it's one of the better programs in the state of Florida. This is a legitimate opportunity for him to play against high level competition and play for one of the better schools. So we're going to see what he can do. He just had a teammate, Colton Heinrich, who's a 3-star tight end, just committed to Georgia. So there's talent around him. So we're going to get a really good look at what this kid is actually made of. And look, the thing is that this offseason, he's looked really, really good. There are a lot of people that love his arm strength, love his accuracy. They think that this is a guy that's really being slept on right now, and is one of those guys that, because he did not start last year, when a lot of these recruiting rankings start to come together, he could really start to soar up some of these boards as we go throughout the next few months and throughout the season. Now, ultimately, how high does he end up going as a prospect? I mean, I wouldn't expect him to get probably above a mid-level 3-star, but it really doesn't matter. The thing that you have to look at if you are a Tar Heel fan here with this is, look, is this a sure thing like some of the other guys like Drake Maye, Sam Howell? We knew those guys were going to be really, really good players coming in. Even Connor Harrell, to a certain extent, really high floor, a guy that maybe, you wonder, does he have the ceiling of some of the other guys, because he was the 3-star prospect. Michael Merdinger's a little bit different. His floor, he could be a guy that never sees the field at Carolina because he just doesn't really pan out. He's a guy that, you're taking a little bit of a risk on. Or this guy could blow up and he could be someone that everybody looks back on and they say, how in the world were we off on this kid? Why was he not starting ahead of the guy that's playing at Central Florida right now when he's at Carolina and he's tearing it up? So I think it's a bit of a risk in terms of the future. I'd be stunned if he's the starter next year. Now I could be wrong. He could come in there and absolutely burn it up. But I think with him, he's a guy that's probably going to take a little bit of time to develop. I think that's one of those ones kind of fits along with the rest of the class they have, which is a real developmental class, guys they've identified that they like, that fit their system, but that they're going to have to put a little bit into. And in terms of the future overall, I've seen a lot of people, and I believe Don Callahan at Inside Carolina actually wrote an article. It's probably about a month ago now, where he was talking about what Carolina would ultimately do at quarterback before they got Merdinger. The thought was that as of right now, a lot of people believe they will go into the transfer portal to get a guy with where they sit at this point. That kind of shocks me just because of how quickly Connor Harrell sort of took that backup job this past season. But I got to tell you, I have questions, of course, about Merdinger. I have questions about Tad Hudson. I saw him play multiple times in high school. Never really wowed by him. I think there's tools there, but still work to do. And then, Connor Harrell, I don't know, that concerns me that they saw him this entire spring. He won that job so quickly, and yet they still feel like at this point they would have to go get a transfer. So
recruit above him. Yeah,
we'll see. But I mean, still, look, even with this pickup, I've seen some people that are worried about the type of talent Carolina has, not only in this room, but in the other rooms. This is not as bad as the Larry Fedora era. This is a guy that could turn out to be a really good prospect. This isn't a guy like Nathan Elliott, who you're kind of just adding and saying, hey, if we eventually have to use him, we're probably in a really bad spot. And sure enough, they got to that spot. I don't think we have to worry about that right now.
I mean, it seems to me that at this point, you've got Connor Harrell, who's got a nice, probably higher floor, but just not the ceiling of, to go with our conversation from the two basketball players on the show, but not the ceiling of either a Sam Howell or a Drake Maye. So he would be a safe, albeit unsexy option. Marlow, do you see a world in which either Connor Harrell, Tad Hudson, or Merdinger is a starter? Obviously, that's a couple years away with Merdinger, but no, he's 24, right?
Yeah, 20. Yeah, he'll come in next year. He'll be
next
in that.
Year. So do you see a world in which one of those three guys is the starter next year, or do you think Mack Brown goes and finds somebody around the country and is next year's starter?
I mean, I definitely see that being an option. But I have to tell you, I'm not against Carolina going portaling either. You've kind of skipped the portals the last couple of years because you've had Sam Howell and Drake Maye. You're not going into the portal and finding a guy better than those. But you're just looking at in recent years. I mean, Joe Burrow portal takes LSU, wins a national championship. Hendon Hooker, Virginia Tech, Tennessee goes to the Orange Bowl. Look at what Spencer Rattler, the guy that Drake Maye will face week 1 in Charlotte, doing now at South Carolina. And so, and I think that Carolina is still an attractive enough place if Mack Brown's the head coach, and depending on what this year does, to where you're going to see a big name or two at the quarterback position enter the portal. And so if that happens, I'd like to see Carolina be aggressive and try to get one of those guys. If not, you've got the insurance of Harrell being a guy that I feel like you're confident enough could keep you afloat and take you to a bowl game or something like that. A lot of this is really different because we haven't seen Chip Lindsey's offense.
Yep.
We don't know what it's going to look like. If it was Phil Longo's offense and we see, Harrell go on the field at some point this year and you saw him play in mop-up duty, maybe you don't have those concerns and you just roll with him. That's not the case right now. So as of today, I would say, no, this time or, this upcoming winter and this upcoming spring, I'd like to see Mack Brown go in the portal because there's a good chance you could upgrade the quarterback position, which, as we all know, is the most important position in sports.
Okay. Interesting stuff here, fellas. We're going to have to wait and see, but you know what? Let's enjoy one more ride with Drake Maye before we have to worry about getting to any of this, because this young man is very special, and I can't wait to see what he does in his last year. All right, folks, thanks so much for joining us this week on Locked on Tar Heels. Another great week of shows and conversation. As always, so grateful to both Anthony and Josh for joining us. Make sure you go follow their great work on Heel Tough Blog. You can follow them on Twitter at HTBAnthony and at HTB_Josh. You can follow the show at Locked on Heels or me at Isaac Schade. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, smash the like button, and leave some comments. If you want to have more in-depth conversation, you can email us, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. By the way, don't forget, we are very close to this hair on top of my head being Gandhi. And so just get your last looks in while you can. Love it or hate it, it's going to be gone very soon. Hey, folks, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be right back with you next week. But until then, peace.